Harjas, thank you so much for joining me. This is an absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for like the past 3 weeks. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, Raj, and thank you very much for having me. Really excited for this conversation.
I'm looking forward to it. We dive straight in. We don't mess around. I want to set some context. Many people never find their love. When did you find the love or the interest for tech and finance?
I think we have to go back to high school for that. I think like a lot of Indian kids and their parents, my parents were adamant that I pursued the sciences, something complex, something that they could be proud of. So I kind of rolled into taking science subjects. I wasn't super into the hardcore sciences like physics, etc., but I was good at math, and I took a few computer science classes in 11th and 12th. So that kind of made me feel like that was something I could do. And I think gadgets and tech was something that my dad was very much into. So my dad was one of the first people to get a computers early on when they came to India. And I remember playing games from a very early age, tinkering with his computer, connecting to the internet was a big deal. So all those things kind of shaped my interest in tech from a very early age.
What was family like for you as a kid? I think it's very indicative of one's entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah, I think family life early on was I lived in a joint family, so I had a big family that I was part of. We all lived in the same house under the same roof. Growing up, very much mollycoddled by my mom. She was very protective and didn't let me go into too many dangerous activities or very protective environment. But I had a cousin brother who lived with me in the same house, and he was the one who kind of taught me everything that was not good for me. But eventually, I think I credited him with a lot of street skills and street smartness that I gained. So I think family life was very protective, very close. Played a lot with my cousins. You know, a big family. So you come home and there's like just other people to enjoy with, grandparents. They cook for you. I think the relation that I shared with them growing up truly like shaped me. Still call them very much so. I'm very fortunate that they're still around. So I think it was a very fun environment growing up.
Having the big Indian families is one of the nice things that we get in our culture, right? You know, we get to spend so many years with our parents, our grandparents, our cousins, our brothers, our sisters, whichever ones that you have, and you can kind of riff off them. They're like your best friends for life in some respects, right? You have
Yeah.
friends outside of that, best friends outside of that, but ultimately you spend so much time with family and so much time with your cousins that they are your best friends in a lot of respects as well.
Yeah, and every festival that you have, they kind of come over. You play sort of card games, board games, and actually a lot of my cousins are into tech. So even from a very early age, we were all into gaming, and I have to credit them for kind of pushing my boundaries on how much I knew about tech because they would have these intense debates about how computers worked. And I was not always the best at that, but I think being in those conversations definitely sparked my curiosity and pushed me to learn more.
So at a young age, you were being taught about computers. What was that like?
And it was interesting. So like my cousin was like the very first person I know. He got a PlayStation 1. So we used to play like Need for Speed, first person shooting. So in India, I remember there was like a center that you would go to play games connected by LAN. So we would go and play Counter-Strike on afternoons, and you would play against random people, but everyone had to be in the same center because there was no connectivity to play remote. So like that's how we started, and then I remember getting my first kind of iPod, and my cousin helped me jailbreak it so we could use custom fonts because we were tired of like Apple's like boring old themes. So we were tinkering it to like install very like devilish themes, different fonts. So we were already like tinkering with computers from a very early age, changing like computer parts ourselves, going to this like wholesale market in Delhi where you get like computer parts. I remember going there with my dad a lot, buying CDs, like burning CDs to have like MP3 songs. We couldn't like get like from the internet. Didn't want to pay for it, so we were like sharing all those CDs amongst friends.
I love it. I mean, India is one of those places where like it's hustle everywhere, right? You it's just in the ether of that place. You know, there's 1.6 billion people now, and ultimately everyone's trying to vie for their own way to earn a living. There are at least $21 billion CEOs or CEOs of billion-dollar companies now. I mean, that all come from India. What was it like growing up in Delhi?
I think, man, it's like a breeding ground for CEOs, right? Like it's not a surprise we see majority of global companies have Indian CEOs. Actually, I was reading a thread on X recently that even in Europe now, like a big percentage of CEOs are Indians. I think it's got to do a lot with the fierce competitiveness and the fact that you have to find workarounds to get very basic things done because like there was no kind of process or formal processes to just do like regular things. uh, you would have to find loopholes in the system. Like I remember getting a driver's license back in the day, there was just like no process, right? Like you have to stand for like days in a queue. So like what do, right? There's no time, there's no way I'm going to stand for like hours in a queue in the sun. So you have to find like ways around things. And I think that kind of coaches you from a very early age that like there's always going to be roadblocks, there's always going to be problems, but there's always going to be a solution if you just like try hard enough to find it. Someone or like something will lead you to it. So I think that's uh, and also I think the fact that there's just like so many people vying and competing for the same set of resources and the same opportunities, you really have to like hustle hard, right? Like you look at the IITs and you look at all these exams, like millions of kids are taking these. So how do you separate yourself? And I think that shapes you if you grow up there.
No, it's true. I mean, I spent a year there, and I think there's a street in Bangalore where I could get a Harvard degree with my name on it, and it looked identical to the actual one. And I contemplated actually getting it just so I could have it to say that I went to Harvard, but I ultimately decided the real one was better. India's a great place. It is a breeding ground, and I enjoy going just for the love of the game of life. It's just a beautiful place. It's a great reset. Um, but what's interesting is when you want to differentiate in India, you find that a lot of individuals they get their IIT education and then they go and do their MBAs. You moved to the US because of the education system. Why? Like, is India's not good enough?
No, I think, man, I'll be very honest. I think for me, while I was like in high school and I was like studying, the format in which the education was conducted was something I struggled with. Like I wasn't always able to just learn theoretical concepts and get just tested on those. And it felt like the person who remembered those concepts the best and could perform on the day of the test sort of won. And I always had the issue that it's not really testing how well someone knows the subject. And I think it carried on after high school when you had to kind of prepare for entrance examinations. It was very much that you have to perform on this test. As compared to in the US, I felt like I would have much more opportunities, not just to challenge me academically, but also to immerse myself in electives, be able to study things such as like music, arts. I was in the dance team in my uni, and also just the fact that I would be surrounded with people from multiple cultures, which would shape my worldview. So I think that package definitely appeals to me when I was growing up, and that's kind of why I made the decision to move to the US.
Was it a difficult decision? Like just personally, I know when I went to India for a year, it was a relatively easy decision. I was at that moment in my life where I wasn't doing much, and I felt like that change was going to put me on a different trajectory for quite possibly it was a fork in the road of my life.
Yeah.
And the way I've ended up. With you going to the US and Virginia Tech, was it an easy decision or was it quite a hard one? You're moving halfway around the world. I understand the community in the US is quite big, but like, was it tough?
Honestly, man, it was the easiest decision I made. I was adamant. Like I wanted to leave. I wanted to go. The reason was also that I think back in high school and things like that, the line at which you start can a lot of times be skewed based on your background, based on the financial circumstances that you come from, and oftentimes it's not always a level playing field, in my opinion. And I think when I wanted to move to the US, it was almost having a fresh start to be able to explore and learn about myself firstly, and be in an environment that fostered a bit more equality in how like they educated you and how the the level playing field was structured, and I felt like that would be a better environment for me to excel, and hence why I think it was one of the easiest decisions I made.
Harjas, where does the love for dance come from? I was talking to your sister, and I was so curious, coding and Bhangra at the same time, and doing that at
Yeah.
uni. Like, where did you get the time, and why do you find those to be passions?
I think, man, dancing is something that is in every Punjabi's blood. Like you can't take that away. It's just there. Now, if it comes out or not, that's a separate question. I think when it came out before the dance team, it was a very like questionable routine, and
Hmm.
it would usually involve being at weddings and having a couple of drinks and shaking a leg. So it wasn't
Completely
very
agree.
official, right? So it wasn't official. It wasn't great. It was just like whatever, like every person does. But I think what happened was that when I was in my freshman, sophomore year, I discovered this incredible community of people around Bhangra. So it was not the dance itself, but the community that like revolves around that dance and the culture was really like something that drew me to it. And I saw these fantastic individuals who were performing this cultural dance to a level which just intrigued me. I was like, wow, I haven't actually seen this in India, and there's people here who are like excelling at the routine, going to competitions, having after parties, and that whole just that whole routine really excited me. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna give it a shot. I'll give it a shot. It's like I should be able to get through. And I tried, got rejected the first time. Tried again, man. Second time, got rejected again. So clearly wasn't very good in the standards, in the official standards. But what happened was I became very good friends with the folks while I was, trying out and everything. So they promised to help me get better in their free time. So I tried practicing in the evenings, and then when I tried the third time, I finally made my way into the team, and that felt like a great achievement.
Oh, I love it. Did you enjoy your time at university in the US?
Absolutely, man. It was the best 4 years. I think the uni that I chose was also particularly good because it was a big state school, but it was tucked away in this beautiful southwestern Virginia town called Blacksburg, right? It's a very small town, but everyone there goes to the uni. So the average age is like 21, 22. Everyone's young. It's a very like uh, community oriented school. It's a big sports school as well. So the whole environment in uni was just fantastic, and the dance team, I would say, just amplified it a bit more because I got a chance to travel around, compete on stage, and just make a ton of new friends.
Well, that is awesome. I think I made one of the regrets I have with my uni experience was definitely not being part of any societies. I kind of just lone wolfed it for a lot of it with the group that I had on my course. But I made some great friends. I had a great time, and that's all that really counts, right?
Absolutely, man. And I think for me, I was coming from India, right? And I was like, man, what do I have to lose? Like, I've taken this huge step to move to a completely different country. Let me just immerse myself in as many things as possible, even if it's uncomfortable, even if I can't, like, speak the lingo, or if I'm not super knowledgeable about shows they watched in their childhood. I still wanted to be a part of it. So I think that's what kind of made me join these societies.
Awesome. Tell me the story. I have to ask. Tell me the story about how you ended up at Revolut. It's one of the most interesting things.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you, it was written in the stars. So not a lot of people know this story, but when I moved to the UK, I obviously got an Airbnb. As soon as I landed, I had an Airbnb I had to get to. I go to the Airbnb, and this girl opens the door, and she's like another guest living in the Airbnb. So we start talking, and she tells me that she works for this startup called Revolut, and I had no idea what Revolut was. I was like, oh, that's awesome. She asked me a bit about my background. I said I work in finance, in the engineering side of things. She said that would be awesome because Revolut is always looking for technical people working in the field of finance. But I ignored her at the time. Then I move out of that Airbnb and I move into like a flat, like in a flat share. And the person already living there was, I think, a very early employee of Revolut. Again, so this happened second time in a row. I end up in a flat, and the person living there is early Revolut employee, who then also tells me that, hey man, Revolut would be a great place for you. Why don't you interview? At this time, I'd just been in my gig for like 6 months, so I was still learning, and I still was trying to improve my my skill set in engineering. And I think at the time I downloaded the app because I was trying to pay in like, and I think Lloyd's required me to have a permanent address, and because I couldn't provide that, a friend of mine recommended to download the Revolut app, pay through that. Honestly, I love the product because it just solved like such a key problem for me. And then once I think we were in an evening out with my colleagues from my old company, and we were all like having drinks, and I run into this crowd of people from Revolut, and they introduce me to this guy, and they're like, "Hey, looks like this guy is hiring for a position. You should chat with him." So I talked with him, and I think at this point in time, I'd reached a year at my old job, and I think I was ready to work at a much smaller company, make more of an impact. So I applied. The girl that I met the first time referred me, and I went in for an interview, and it was this guy from the night out who was interviewing me for the role. So it was a very, very interesting conversation. And fortunately, after that interview, I was able to to join Revolut.
What did you start with Revolut when you joined?
I was a very early product hire in the wealth and trading team. So the wealth and trading team was a very, very small team. They were in the process of launching Europe's first commission-free trading platform. And I think mostly the team consisted of 4 or 5 engineers and one product person. So they had hired me to kind of aid the product process. Early on, my job was a lot of like operational work, understanding like how the operation is set up, how it's working, helping on user experience of the product. And that's how I kind of learned the ropes in product and product management. So that was kind of how my early role was focused on. It was basically everything. You had to talk to customer support, you had to talk to the engineers, you were working with a designer. It was just working with every single person to get things done.
I think you do yourself a disservice. I know over that Revolut kind of career trajectory, you scaled wealth from like 0 to 2 million users across countries. Like, what are the biggest learnings from that experience?
And there were so many learnings. I would say everything I learn now is I know now is down to that experience. I think first and foremost, what we learned was like shipping very, very fast. I think there was a culture at Revolut that revolved around getting things done, but getting things done fast. And I think the team was very much focused on iterating very, very quickly. So we had a roadmap that we came up with, and then eventually everything was straight up execution. And I think that was one of the key learnings that I had, was how to work in a cross-functional team and be able to ship products very, very quickly. That was, I think, one lesson. I think number two lesson was just understanding how a startup grows and scales that quickly. Like when you were at Revolut, there were like probably 20, 25 people joining every week, and how that how that company managed to like scale quickly, grow so quickly. Their business was growing so fast. I think you just learn so much just being in that setup. So that was, I think, like key two learnings from.
When you're in the sprints and you're building out a product like Wealth, is there a secret sauce to uncovering user needs?
I think there is. What I would say is that we knew our competitive landscape very well, and I think early on, more than user needs, it was about the offering itself. So it was like, how can we offer the most amount of securities as quickly as possible? So can we offer all the assets to everyone? So I think that's the problem space that we were focused on for like majority of the time. And I think after that, we went into deep into user understanding, like how they were like looking at our product, and we realized that there weren't enough tools to educate them about what securities to buy and sell. So I think that shaped the roadmap going forward, which was a lot of research and analysis features that we added to the Revolut product, so that it went away from just like buying and selling, but also being able to deeply research and analyze instruments on the product.
I think that was one of the things I loved when I first joined the Revolut space and started using the app over its competitors. It was just everything worked seamlessly. It was really simple compared to a normal bank account, right? And when it comes to building product, is simple always better, or does it require simple plus education to really make a great product?
It's a very good question. I think how I frame it is that I think the way to build product is by providing simplicity in a complex space. So I think my philosophy has always been the space can be complex. So I think the trading investing space is generally it's a quite complex area. Like not everyone is familiar with it, not everyone understands it. But that shouldn't prevent you from building a product that simplifies it and makes it a pleasure to use. And I think simplicity goes a long way in the education process as well. The more simple your product is to use, the more likely it is that someone will self educate or be able to understand what they should expect from the product. And the more complex it is, and if you have a complex space, that's like complexity squared. And it's then more challenging for someone to get the most out of it because the the friction of them understanding and going through complex products is just going to be that much higher.
I completely agree. It's so easy, especially in our lines of work. You're building products, I'm building experiences. It's so easy with feature creep. You just want to add it's just more and more and more and more to the scope of the product, and ultimately you end up with something that is a little bit complex, and users can't use and users don't understand, and then you have a fall in user rates and monthly active users or daily active users. How do you navigate feature creep?
It's I think it's one of the most like toughest challenges as a product person because a lot of times the feeling is the more features you add, the more the chances are for your product to work. But I think that's definitely misconstrued because I think adding features is not how your product will actually work. I think first you need to make sure that the core problem you're solving or the core loop of your product, like the main job that it's supposed to solve for the user, actually works. I think once that works, you should be able to get a lot of users just using your product to solve that particular problem. And then I think after that comes solving other variable needs that arise as a result of that first problem space. Then it's also a matter of how and what your targets and your key performance indicators are as an organization to then prioritize features that you should build. If your targets are revenue, then you need to focus on revenue driving features. If your targets are, let's say, daily active users or weekly active users, you need to prioritize engagement and then features that increase that. So I think it's just a matter of prioritizing, understanding the core needs, and finding a balance.
I know it's that the balance in everything is so hard to just kind of keep equal, right? I was talking to Carlos, and we were discussing how Revoluters look at the world differently compared to other companies, especially at that time in that early stage of the startup. Why do you think that is? Because he was telling me that at the time they didn't have a user research team, but ultimately they were able to get things more right than wrong. Their vision of the future of what they wanted to build and how they saw investing and finance and banking kind of moving to the state it is in today was more right than wrong. Why do you think that is?
I think it's driven from the founding team. I think that's a culture that comes from the top. I think taking like not taking no for an answer, questioning everything that is told to you because it is a space which has a lot of preconceived rules, regulations. Every time you try to do something, there's going to be someone telling you no. I think that's kind of how that industry works, and I think we've been trained to tear down those walls and get it done. So we've always like the values at Revolut are very much oriented around never settling and getting things done, regardless of what blockers that might arise. And I think that's why you see a lot of alumni from there going on and starting their own companies is because it's just a mindset. And I feel like that culture definitely comes from the founding team.
Is that something that's explicitly said? Like, I've always wondered. I never worked in a startup myself. Maybe some point in the future, I'm a founder or something. But like, do you explicitly say question everything, or is it just you understand when you walk into a room, you question everything?
Yeah, you question everything, but I think it's also it's also at every step in how you operate. So, for example, like you'll have a product review in which you'll be, let's say, presenting something, and you'll say, "Oh, actually, this wasn't possible because of X," and you'll face pushback, you'll face questions as to why, and until you don't dig to like the bottom of the problem, you won't be able to move forward. So I think it's the preparation that it takes to go into the reviews and to go into those kind of meetings actually trains you to always understand the problem very, very well and be able to know the roadblocks, be able to even know the solutions to them, and then also all the constraints that you're facing. So it's not just like that, it's the culture, but it's very much ingrained in how that operation is set up, even in like the day-to-day interactions between teams. That's just expected of you as an operator then.
Did you find you were happy with your time at Revolut? I know it's an intense workplace, especially at a young startup when you joined, and it's grown to be the beast that it is today. But did you enjoy your time there?
Absolutely. I think there's just like no doubt about it. It was exactly what I was personally looking for. I made that change because I was, in a big organization. The opportunity for impact was low, and everyone was very much set in like how things were done. And I think I was really looking to be in that kind of an environment. So it worked really well for me because I wanted to dedicate those years of my career working hard and being able to solve problems very quickly. So yeah, I would say that I credit a lot of what I know to my time at Revolut.
We talked a lot about wealth and finance, but I haven't asked the question. What was your first investment in life? Was it stock, shares, a watch, a car? Some people invest in gold, silver. What was yours?
I think of my first one would be I think in India there was like a culture that you would have some kind of savings, or over time sometimes your relatives give you some cash on like some festivals. So I had all of that cash accumulated, or my parents actually just accumulated it for me. I never even got to see it. But I think when I got to 18, at that time, that accumulated cash was, I think my dad taught me about mutual funds at the time, and he was like, this is how mutual funds actually work, and we should put this cash that's saved up in those funds here in India. So that was my first exposure to what investing was, what a mutual fund was. But largely through college, I wasn't very much into this space at all. It took me to start my first job in financial services when I really, really started learning about the world of finance.
I've got to ask. I've interviewed a couple of founders. I know some peers who have started businesses. They all tell me, as a joke, their best ideas come in the shower. Don't know why. Something about water on your head just, for some reason, makes the brain start ticking. What was the moment, or what was the thought kind of process that motivated you to start shares?
Yeah, so yeah, I didn't get the idea in the shower. My idea was a bit more thought out, and it seemed like something I really wanted to do for a while. So for me, like when I was at Rev, obviously we were working on the trading product, and I felt like the Revolut product could benefit from like a network behind it. Like it could be made social. And that thought was largely driven from a product I used in the US, which was Venmo. Very simple product, peer-to-peer payments. You can pay friends for basic services. So a lot of times in the dance team, when we would have like travel expenses or meal expenses or team expenses, we were using Venmo to pay each other. So I was a big user of that product. And what it had was a very simple feed that showed you what your friends were paying each other for. And a lot of times it was quite funny. People would like make up things, and just generally like it was a good engaging experience. So at my time at Revolut, I thought that the product could benefit from that, especially because everyone and in your friend group was using Revolut at this point. So they had achieved network effects, and having that kind of a social experience would encourage people to open the product more instead of just using it as a payment product. But long story short, I think at the time it was a bit more challenging to reorient the entire thing and do social. So I felt like it was a problem that I wanted to solve myself, and it helped at the time that there were a few trends in the investing space that contributed to this current of social investing. So you had a few kind of stocks that went up like crazy. There was a Reddit and like GameStop, a meme stock era, which definitely made me think that there was like a community around investing, and there was a reason that a product incorporating that community could do very well instead of having a disjointed experience of going back and forth across different products to understand the markets.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, like when I was doing the research for this, I was thinking about how we invest. And when we invest, typically as like consumer investors, we talk about our investments. We talk to our peers, we talk to our family and say, what do you think? And I just realized like I use every other app except for yours at the moment. And I'm completely changing it because I feel like investing is the way that you're thinking about building investing and are is the way that we actually invest, which makes my life so much easier, right? And I thought this is genius. This like why wasn't this done before? When you started, the thought was percolating. You put together the proposal for Rev Social. Um, Ultimately, it wasn't the right time in the organization to do that. Why did you decide to act on it? Like, what made you? There's always like a trigger moment for everyone.
Yep.
What was yours?
Yeah, I think I'm not saying this is a novel idea, right? Like I think these kind of experiences have been done before. So you can take a vertical and have a social experience around it. The best example would be a product like Strava. So you've had products before Strava that have been very much around running and recording your run by yourself, a very much single player experience. But what Strava did was you can just connect with your friends and then you're able to just see how they're running. And that's just building a social layer around a vertical such as fitness. It's also been done in other products like Pinduoduo and like many other verticals have tried this. And I think investing was one thing that I felt like was missing. And I couldn't see another product in the market at the time, especially in the UK and Europe, and even competitors in the US. I didn't feel like they had truly solved the problem of social in the investing space. So that's kind of what pushed me to start. And there was honestly never a better time to start. I always wanted to start my own thing. And it's always been an ambition of mine, and I think that was the right time for me to take the plunge.
Like even though that you know how tough fintech is from working at Revolut and from your job in finance previously, why was then the right time?
I think that that's precisely why, because you are like you know the environment well, like you understand what it takes to succeed in that. Like when I started Shares and started working on the product, like working with, let's say, folks from compliance, understanding their asks and needs wasn't a surprise for me. Whereas if you bring in a product person who's not really used to that, it can be just a very very strange experience for them because everything you do has to be approved, everything you do is challenged. So it's a very difficult place to build product. And I think because I was very much used to that, I knew exactly how to work with individuals from teams such as that. It put me in a position where I could succeed. Like I understood the op model very well. I knew my stakeholders very well. So it wasn't a surprise for me to work in the space. In fact, I feel like the founder market fit for that was actually better than ever.
You got to humor me here and forgive my naivety. I was trying to understand how the investing business model works, right? And I've played with remittance apps and things like that, and the margins always feel very small, and it feels like the entire industry is built on just it's a volume game, as many users as humanly possible to get to profitability. Can you give me a little insight in how the investing business model works?
Yeah, I think it's right. Like naturally, the more users you have, the more volumes you have, the more transactions you have, the higher the chances of you monetizing are. But I think what's key is owning that whole operational pipeline of execution of a trade. So I think a lot of times when business models are discussed, we discuss how much a customer has to pay or the transactional model for a customer. So that's I think just one part of it, but it's not enough for you to like become a very very well monetized business. So I think the the secret sauce, or the, I would say, where you actually make the money is in the operational layer. It's if your model is set up to efficiently execute trades at a lower cost, if you're directly plugged into the exchange yourself, so that your cost of execution is very low, so that when you charge the customer, what you make is like your margins are then higher. But if you just have a plug and play setup and then you're essentially charging the customer, that's not going to help you to achieve like scale in terms of like monetization. And that, along with having like a huge uh, volume of customer base and being operational in multiple countries, then that combination, along with the operational prowess, allows you to monetize.
Humor me. When we think about how the cost of execution over time traditionally gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, ultimately your margins increase, but at some point, doesn't the volume just get to a point where you have no net new customers? At what point, how do you add value, or how do you extract value out of your existing consumers? For instance, Netflix, they're running ads now, they're increasing their pricing, they're locking down on passwords. Do you start offering a subscription service? Is that how investing changes in the future?
Not necessarily. I think it depends. I think you can look at a customer's pain points and then start offering them other products and services that then connect with their investing journey. So, for example, let's say you have an investing product where a person is just investing. The next step for them would be to invest in a tax efficient wrapper. So then you can offer them an ISA account. After that, let's say the next step is you figure out that they have a tax reporting need because they're investing on your product. Then you can offer a product that just takes care of their taxes. One click, boom, your tax reporting problems are solved. You can charge for that. After that, let's say you want to save for retirement. There's some retirement wrappers in multiple countries. So I think the trick is to keep solving problems for the customer in their life cycle of money management. So that's why you see Revolut, they started with like a wallet, FX when you travel, and then they've kind of moved on from that to really invest in every single money issue that a person might have. So transfers, remittances, investing, crypto, all of that. So I think the faster you can kind of get to that point, the quicker you can dominate.
When you were starting shares, did you have a mentor that guided you in the early days? Taking on a challenge that is social investing, or investing socially, is incredibly difficult, I can imagine, especially as we just discussed, in the market. Uh, did you have a mentor that guided you, and what was the single most important lesson that you took away from them?
I wouldn't say there was like an official mentor. I think I used what I had learned and started building the product. But I would say that both my co-founders, they were a very very strong source of support for me. We had not known each other for a very long time, and the trust they showed in my capabilities, and also both of them were more experienced in the entrepreneurship space. So it helped me learn a lot from their experience, and I think that kind of a support system around me helped me, execute quickly. So I think our team itself became a support system, and I wouldn't say there was like an official mentor that was helping me during that time.
Oh, well, you did it. I think you're one of the few founders that was able to do it without the mentor. That's pretty awesome. But having the support network of your co-founders is equally as great, right? Especially seeing as you mentioned, they're a little bit more educated in the space. They're a little bit wiser, so to speak. We talked about iterating when you were at Revolut, and just rapidly iterating and getting products to market. When you're raising investment for shares, right? I hate selling a dream. I find selling a vision is one of the most difficult things to do. Did you build a prototype and take that into investor meetings? Like, how does that work in the early days when you're building a financial product like yours?
Yeah, I think you need to have certain level of like product mock-ups and being able to visually demonstrate your vision. So I would say there was very early design of shares, which my co-founder had shared with me, and we had looked at it together. So we did have a very early like vision of what that would look like. But eventually, when Carlos joined the team, that's when we started to kind of redo the entire thing and rethinking everything. So I think what we had in those first designs never actually ended up on the product. It was a completely completely new offering that we came up with later.
When you're raising that first 10 million, what's it like? I mean, I haven't come anywhere near kind of raising that amount of capital at my age yet, and also at this point in my career, but I can imagine it's quite daunting. I can imagine it's a lot of fun. You know, ultimately, I've heard that investors believe in founders, not always in products, and it's the execution of that founder that's going to get it done. What's it like walking into those meetings knowing that ultimately you've got something to give to the world?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of factors. I think first we have to understand that the 2021 era was a ZERP era. It was very much founder friendly. Uh, there was cash available in the market to pursue big ideas. That was number one. I think number two was that the founding team itself. I think the three of us, we were a very, very strong team to tackle this idea. My co-founder Ben, he's been in this space of businesses for the last like 10 years. So he's very well known. He understands how to raise investment, how to like build businesses. My other co-founder Francois has also been like in very senior engineering roles throughout his career, and I was coming from Revolut with the exact experience of knowing how to build a trading product. So I think that's already like something very, very strong and doesn't happen quite often for a team to kind of come together. So I think a combination of that and then also the people we were bringing on day by day strengthened the faith that the investors had and putting that kind of cash behind us. And I think this is a space where you do actually require uh, significant capital investment purely because we operate in a regulated space and to move fast in multiple jurisdictions. That's kind of the way we decided to pursue.
We talk about moving fast in those investor meetings, and obviously for the products as well. How do you think about new features in exploration sessions? Like, do you challenge the problem and proposal? What do you like to do?
We have it. Obviously, our team structure has changed quite a bit since we started. And I think the way we are working now is beginning of a quarter, we actually look at the biggest product challenges that we have to accomplish. Part of them are guided by our company goals. So the main revenue driving features would be tier one. Tier two would be things that we've shipped, but there's improvements that we because they're causing significant amount of, let's say, customer support issues. So they'll be prioritized next. And third is something that I personally like a lot is customer delight features that we introduce into the product to keep the experience just unique and lovable. That's something that brings delight to a user when they actually use the product. Uh, and that's how kind of we segregate features. And I think an exploration session is a very early iteration of the problem being solved by the product person and their designer. And it's a very open space where we are able to give feedback, question the problem altogether, shelve the problem altogether if it doesn't make sense. So we then, as a team, have all eyes on deck on the problem. So that's how the exploration session allows for everyone to be very creatively involved in the problem solving process.
I was talking to Harry, and I promised him I'd ask this question. He describes you as a heuristic thinker with cutthroat assumptions. For example, the index gains feature that you were working on, right? But ultimately, if you find the data or you see a vision for why the current solution is wrong, you'll instantly change it. How do you balance user-centric product decisions with business value?
It's a very tricky space or a tricky problem to solve, and also depends on which cycle of the company you're in. I think currently the way I do it is that I definitely prioritize like business value features which have to be shipped. Like there's just no way around it. But I'm a product enthusiast, and I love building like beautiful, delightful features, and I want my experiences to just be admired. So with every business critical feature, revenue generating feature we ship, I do introduce a couple of sprints where we just work on making sure that the product still remains lovable, right? It's not just like a business product that just solves a business problem, but actually it brings a smile to your face. Like it makes you connect to this user experience when you're using it for the first time, that wow, like actually I haven't seen this kind of offering in the investing space. So that's kind of where I excel in balancing both of those, and both of those are critical. I don't think you can have one without the other. But usually 90% of my job is like making sure that both of them make their way into the product at the right time.
Wait, how do you learn this? Like, when I talk to the team, they make you out as this clairvoyant, this like product visionary, quite literally, who has you are so tapped in on product and user experience and user interface. Where did you learn it? I'm so curious.
I think, man, I think there has to be a case for having some kind of acumen for it. I've thought about this myself. I'm not gonna lie to you, because I I wasn't in the product craft for a very long time. Like I have people who've worked in chairs with me who have been in the product space for a very, very long time, and I think there's something to be said about having some kind of an acumen and understanding and questioning things in the world. And I think it goes back to a very early stage, or when as a kid, like when I was with my dad, we would question why things were built the way they were. We'd be like, oh, it would actually be cool if, this design was this way. So I think I've always been thinking about products like that, even without consciously knowing that about myself. And I think that's kind of shaped on how I make product decisions now, which is you're a sponge and you have all these different voices that come in. So you have your investors, you have your co-founders, you have all these other teams, you have customer support, you have customers. Everyone wants things to happen on the product. So you kind of have to absorb all of that, take it all in, and then spit out the most kind of insightful feature that you build. And I think that's probably the most challenging part for a product manager is condensing all these different voices, being a sponge at all times because things are not always working, and being able to then produce something, then that produces magic. And those are the magical moments that I personally live for. So I think that's kind of how I would describe it.
How is there a system for doing that? Because I still haven't figured it out. Honestly, when you've got so many different stakeholders, so much value that you've got to add, do you have a system for how that works, or are you just so attuned in now that it's just you just do it?
No, I think there is a system. I think you have to be very structured in how you're managing everything. And I think it goes back to having a very clear understanding of what your North Stars are, and making people always be mindful and go back to what those North Star metrics are that you're targeting. So I think it helps to have a very clear structure of like metrics you're trying to get, why it is that your roadmap was built a certain way, and why each person and every team is working on a specific problem at any given point in time. I think if you have that clarified and agreed with everyone, I think that's what leads to this kind of like brutal execution. Otherwise, if people are not on the same page, you can't execute. And I think that's I think something that has helped. And the other thing would be communication. I think if you're able to communicate well on a weekly, bi-weekly basis to the team and to the company, what is it that you're driving forward, you'll see that people are more or less bought in to what it is that you're building. So those are the two things I think that help a lot with like very fast execution, clear structure, clear targets, and then making sure those are communicated with everybody around you.
When we talk about like speed of execution, right? I spend a lot of time researching and looking at artificial intelligence and how it can impact businesses, especially when we're building experiences at Longur, where I am. But with your products and the user experiences and the user interfaces that you're building, do you think that they're essentially going to become useless with AI? Given that at some point in the future, every individual, every user could have a custom experience, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's what should actually happen, right? Because everyone should be able to kind of create these beautiful experiences that will lead to more people being able to create products very quickly. So I think that's actually what would happen is like if I could just use a tool to build like a really amazing, like beautiful experience in like let's say the ride hailing space or any other like last mile delivery space. I think that would be like success, right? Because then like literally everyone can build a product, and the amount of entrepreneurship and creativity is just gonna like flywheel and explode. So I think generally, like, yeah, that's something that will happen at some point.
Look, I wanna talk about hiring for a bit because I hear that you are one hell of a hirer at Shares, and you just are so tapped into individuals and seeing the value in people, whether they see it in themselves or not. So, with regards to the team at Shares, I noticed when I was talking to them, they're kind of distributed. What's your perspective of distributed teams across countries and building in person?
I think, man, like distributed teams are a reality now. You can't operate like a global business without that, right? So that's something that we have to work with and live with. But I do believe the value of an office space. I do believe that when I'm with my team of designers and PMs and I am able to bring them into an office space and work with them, we generally come up with like much better solutions to our problems. So I think it's a combo. Uh, no issue with distributed teams. A lot of our engineering teams are distributed. We work with them. Like actually at Revolut, I was working completely with like a distributed team all in Russia. So I'd never met most of my team, and I was working with them just fine. But I think my designer was based locally, and I think now I've made sure that the design team around me more or less is based in London. So that kind of helps me find a balance.
Do you feel like that's because engineering, you could kind of understand what needs to be built and how it's built, and everyone can get their head around it. But when it comes to design, you've really got to throw things at the wall sometimes and see what sticks, and have those ideation sessions where you come up and you cook up with some batshit crazy ideas.
Yeah, I think so. Like at least between me and Carlos as well, like majority of the work we did at the beginning was together in person, like sitting together late night. Like 'cause some of the ideas you have can be very crazy and can be very late at night when you come up with them. So I think product managers, product designers, I encourage them to be as close as possible, even if you're not like geographically located. I know a couple of my team members who make an effort to kind of come visit the office, even though they're remote. Once they'll make trips because it helps them so much more to be in tune with the product and with the company. So I generally agree that product design, product managers should be working quite closely together.
I want to talk about your relationship with Carlos, right? Because when I was speaking to him, it feels like you guys are this dynamic duo that can cook up some of the craziest shit in the world and you can make it work. I mean, he was talking about those really late night conversations about when in the early days of Shares, day zero vibes. What's happening in that conversation, in that discussion at like 4 a.m.? You got a whiteboard out, maybe some sticky notes. Like, how does it work when you've got that right hand man to be able to bounce ideas off and has a sounding board and is a sounding board? Do you think it's necessary, product managers, product guys in the early stages, to have that? Or is it better to just take your vision and try and execute it into the world?
Yeah, it's a very interesting relationship. I think you make it sound like we're married or something, but no, I think it's very interesting. Like before Carlos, I never really truly worked with a designer of his caliber. I think a lot of times I was paired up with a designer who like we were working more like, okay, hey, this is the problem, design it, and that was it. You know, like traditionally you as a PM are working on the problem space, you communicate that to the designer takes that away, designs a great experience, and you ship that product, right? But I think it was the first time where I met or worked with a designer who was very much about the problem, not so much about the solution. He was very much able to spar with me and have very deep discussions about the problem space that we were having or we were solving. So
Why do you think
it
that
was
is
not
important
always.
to
I
have
think
that sparring?
it's very critical because you both are tinkering not only with yourself but bouncing ideas off of each other and really able to break and unpack complex concepts so that you both are aligned. And I think when that happens, you see how a PM and a product designer are actually supposed to work together. I was never subject to that kind of a spark before. But I think once that happens, you realize that a core understanding of the problem and sparring at that stage is extremely necessary for the outcome to be. And I think that's what we both were very passionate about. Like most of the times we were talking was never about like the design. We actually never really talked about the design. We're never like, hey, this is not great or that is not great. Most of the time our discussions were like deep about like something like how or what the value of a chart is in a trading product. Like why does a chart exist? So like we discussed like a ton of like these kind of like concepts, and I think now in my team the change that I've made is that I expect every designer to also own the problem, because I think like designers are people who not only should be responsible for the solution, but actually deeply involved in the problem space. And that's a change I made like 4 or 5 months ago. So we don't work like a typical product org where the PM comes with the problem, gives it to the designer designs, and boom. So I've changed that product design role to be more of a product first role. So that designing is just part of the job, but really it's about understanding the problem.
When you're thinking about the people that you're working with, right? I was talking to LJ about this. He says that you guys hire Ravenclaws, and he realized this when he was playing Hogwarts Legacy, and it kind of made a lot of sense to me. Ultimately, when you're starting a startup, you end up hiring people that understand the vision, but also are very, very, in some respects, similar to you. They've got that drive, they have that ability to think, they question. Why do you seem to hire Ravenclaws?
Product is a role, a product owner is a role that requires you to have a lot of grit and determination. Like, I think the way you have to operate is you have to be driving things forward, right? It's not any other function where you're kind of supplemental to the product. You're providing things for the product to get built. But when you're in a product position, you are at the end of the day responsible for getting things over the line. And that's just going to be roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, right? And to do that in a very like fast manner requires, I think, just this kind of mentality that I think is very, very difficult to find in the product space. Because the majority of the product people I've worked with or interviewed, uh, there's not been that kind of a drive to ship things quickly. It especially if it's a bigger company with bigger budgets, they're able to spend a lot of time solving a very small problem and really optimizing for that. But in our environment, you don't have that time and you don't have that budget. You have to ship quickly and learn. So I think that's kind of the key insight that I use when I'm interviewing for that role, is like the ability to take punches but still being able to deliver quickly and deliver fast.
Walk me through an interview with Harjas. What's that like?
I think if I've conducted interviews at like various different stages. I think when we were very early, me and Carlos would interview together. So we would have like 2 or 3 rounds. The first one was just general understanding your background, talk us through like what your biggest accomplishments have been. And I think a question that I ask people is like, okay, like if tell me what your expertise is in, and then like communicate to me uh like how you're an expert in that. Like, what did you do that tells me that you're an expert in something that you built? I think that really helps me understand how deeply they understand something that first they're supposed to be good at, and number two, if they can communicate that very well to me, it indicates to me just how well versed they are with the problem space. That's usually round one. Round two, we actually do a bit of a hands-on exercise where we'll just give you a problem on spot. So it'll be like, okay, uh, build me like a library, a social library, like a social app that allows you to understand what your friends are reading and how would you like build that product and solve that problem. So you kind of have to do that on the spot, give you 45 minutes, walk us through your thinking process, mock-ups, problems, questions, assumptions, solutions, so kind of go through that in depth, question each and everything, and we understand how someone would actually go about building a product. And number three is usually the toughest one, which is I would say like a culture fit interview. That's where we try to understand what kind of are you ready to push your boundaries? Is your mindset in the right place to succeed? Are you going to buckle under pressure, or are you going to thrive? So that's the kind of final round where I make a call on if the person will be a good culture fit or not.
When you're thinking about culture fit and individuals and personalities, do you think it's wrong to be in it for the money when you're working?
No, absolutely not. I don't mind that. Like I think there's multiple things that motivate people, right? Like money can be a strong driver. Some people are, believe it or not, driven strongly by titles. They wouldn't want money, but they will want a title. Other people just love what they do, so you don't even need to pay them, don't need to give them a title, and they'll still do the job. That's me. So I think it just I don't mind if that's what drives you forward, and that's clearly articulated, and you're an absolute like legend at what you do, I don't see any reason for being in it for money or whatever else that you desire.
As a first-time founder, what's been your biggest hiring mistake?
My biggest hiring mistake has been thinking that people who've been there and done that will come in and solve problems better than I can, or better than someone who has no experience can. So I think I oftentimes I thought that, oh, this person is like a lot of like highly experienced, great company, solid creds. Just bring them in and they're gonna be able to just like be a monster. And 99% of the time, that's failed. Because I think what I isolated was their success to their environment at the time. You have to be very conscious of the environment in which someone achieves success. So if you take them out and you put them in a different environment, it's not very likely that they will succeed again, or they might fail. So my learning has always been early stage startup, bet on people who are uh, like hyper intelligent, not very, like probably not very experienced, but like have a chip on their shoulder, and they'll actually do much, much better than um, people who might come across as like very experienced and like very, very like subject matter experts. They'd
Yeah,
rather,
sometimes I feel I'm a subject matter expert in podcasting, and then I actually
right?
get to do it and realize that I am just a novice every single time. And what I'd love to ask is if you could go back to the moment that you and the core team, the founders, Carlos, actually committed to building shares, would you do it again?
Absolutely, man. Those months and like that year was by far the most rewarding year I would say of my career. Like the adrenaline rush we had when we built this product in 6 months. Like I think at the time it was the fastest brokerage product, like the fastest a brokerage product had been built in. So we really had to commit in those days. I think it was summer of 2021. I don't think I even ventured out or saw the sun that summer. Me and Carlos were buckled in. And it's funny, my co founders make fun because we had rented a WeWork office and me and Carlos had gotten this bunker at the basement, which was the ugliest place you would want your office to be in. And there was no sunlight that ever reached that place. And me, him, and some of the early team members were just always in that office. It was not until much later that we actually found like a nice space to work out of. But early on, we were all like just in a bunker with no sun, and I would absolutely do it again.
What advice do you have for a young founder who's thinking about their first hire?
I think the advice would be first, do it yourself. And second advice would be, uh, I think nowadays, like you could probably use AI for majority of the tasks that you're going to hire for anyways. So try to find a solution for that. And number two is do make sure that you hire for the right reasons. What I mean by that is like make sure that this person clearly understands what you want them to be there for. And number two, like they are going to understand the culture. I think oftentimes some mistakes we've made is we've hired when it wasn't the right cultural hire. So you might hire somebody who comes from an environment which is relatively laid back, and then if you expect them to just like switch it on, they might find it very challenging. So I think that would be my advice. Make sure you test them on that.
I promised you a curveball question, and here it comes. This is a must-ask question from your sister. How do you plan on giving it all back to the community? We talk about the founders that go on to build unicorns. They go on an exit for billions, right? And then they start building a startup and another product, and everything is successful. At the end of the day, how do you plan on giving it all back? Have you thought about that?
Like giving back and community is something that I think it's very big in my community and where I come from. I think ultimately I pursue and do my work every day because I genuinely enjoy it. Like you can ask my like co-founders as well. When we started this journey, we never discussed or never talked about anything monetary or financial. It was mostly about the fact that I really wanted to build something quite unique in the space. And I think eventually my goal would be to serve as an example for people who possibly look like me to believe that they can do it. And I think that's something that I would want to do for my community is oftentimes growing up, I never saw anyone who looked like me at the top of business career. And that was very like alienating for me because I was like, how am I gonna look like that and be able to succeed in business? Because no one looked like me. And I think I went back to my college, Virginia Tech, last year, where I gave a talk to young aspiring entrepreneurs, and I think that's my way of giving back, sharing my journey, being able to tell them that it's possible. And I think after that, they just thought that it was. I think a lot of times it's just like believing that you can do it because there's a huge amount of fear between thinking you can do it and then you actually doing it. And if I can reduce that surface area between those 2 points, I think that would mean that I've made my mark. And if I can see more people from my community representing top positions in business and in entrepreneurship, I think that would make me very happy.
That is a beautiful answer. Honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect. I thought it would stump you, but Kanika did tell me that you've changed during your time at Shares, and that you've become a slightly more suave person, someone that can answer questions on the fly. So I think that that's great, and I completely agree with the fact that when I was younger, there wasn't a lot of people that looked like me that did things that I do now, and I question myself sometimes, like, am I the right person to do this? And you just got to wake up every day and just believe it's just a thought, and the surface area every day just gets a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller until ultimately it is the drive.
Absolutely, man.
Look, we're getting to the end of the show, and we typically do a quick fire round. I say a question, I say a statement. It's a yes or no answer, or maybe with a little bit of context. And I just love to hear your thoughts on that. How does that sound?
Absolutely, let's do it.
All right. What is your biggest regret?
No regrets, man. We'll just keep moving.
How do you maintain an optimistic mindset in the face of challenge and building and scaling in the finance space?
So I don't want to sound too I don't want to go into too much cultural context, but there's a concept that I believe in which is called chardikala. It means that you have rising spirits in the face of adversity. It's a concept in Sikhism. So whenever you ask someone from my community, how are you doing? Usually reply with this word called chardikala. It just means that regardless of any kind of adversity or difficulty that you'll face, you'll come out on top. And I think that's the only way forward is believing that things will always be fine, even if they're not great right now.
I completely agree. I mean, when I was younger, my dad used to talk to me about the Bhagavad Gita, and there's a piece in there that talks about Arjun on the run, and essentially the story says that you just have to do your duty, whatever that might be, whether it's feels wrong or feels right. If it is the right path for you at that time, you have to do your duty, and ultimately you'll get through it. So I resonate with that a lot. I hear you're a fan of the All In podcast. Which out of the 4 besties is your favorite?
Oh, that's a tough one, man. I feel like the podcast is more interesting when Jason isn't around. I think Friedberg is pretty good. I think Friedberg is pretty good at narrating. I have to say that Shamat would probably be Shamat the Dictator would probably be my favorite bestie.
Honestly, I think Chamath is my favorite, but sometimes his like hot takes are too much, and I need the sound voice of Friedberg to just come in.
And the Science Corner is actually something I love. I know Sax hates it, but I do enjoy the Science Corner.
Gernica said to me that at some point in your life, whether it was from birth, from childhood, you realized that you were just built different. You think that's true?
I think, man, like I've always felt like I've always had that faith in me that I would like do something. So there was like always like this feeling inside of me that was there, even when like times are not that great. I remember I was in the US and I was like stuck, but I still had that feeling inside of me. I don't know how to attribute it to, but I feel like it's a very, very strong innate feeling that I had. So I guess I am.
I love it. I love it. I think you have to have that, right? If you're going to do something as crazy as build a product that ultimately hundreds of millions of users can use, it's like an extreme sport, let's be honest.
So you need to have a bit of that faith inside of you, I guess,
What's the best piece of business advice you've got so far in your life?
Best piece of business advice. I think it would be make sure you finish something you commit to. I think a lot of times commitment is very loosely understood. A lot of times people will say, yeah, I'll get it done, or I'll do that, or I'll do this. But I think the best way to build trust in the business world and around people is firstly like just do what you said you will. If you do that, it'll take you very far. And I think number two is just like generally be like a helpful person. So like if someone asks you for anything, and if you can actually help somebody, just do that. There's nothing, there's no like score, you know. I think the more you help, the more you gain. So those are two tips.
Are you happy?
I would say so, yeah. I would say that I think happiness is something that you don't kind of achieve, but it's like something that you can have every day based on like your surroundings at the point in time. You know, I can say that I'm thankful that I'm in good health. I'm thankful that I'm surrounded by incredibly talented people. I'm thankful that I'm working on a challenging problem, and I'm thankful that I have a good family. So I think that all makes me very, very happy to to be alive and to wake up every day.
I love it. And look, lastly, I'd love to know, what two individuals in your work life do you continuously learn from?
What two individuals I continuously learn from? I think probably one would be my I actually learn a lot from a coworker of mine called Sasha. Yeah, I think he has a knack for always finding a way to optimize things just that bit further. So I've not quite seen a negotiator, an operator like that. And I think his knack for learning on the fly is very good. So I think that's one. And I would say number two, I do learn a lot from my co-founder Ben, because I think he has a very like strong, also never give up mentality. He keeps going and seemingly manages to accomplish things that are not always very possible. So I think those would be the two individuals that I gain from a lot.
Harjas, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you have as well.
Awesome, man. Honestly, it was very, very cool, and I really enjoyed our talk.